Welcome to the broadcast. This is Front and Center here on NTV. Many thanks for staying with us. It has been a very busy week for the President, William Samoei Arap Ruto, sworn into office as the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya on Tuesday, on the 13th day of September 2022. Today was his 3rd day in office. A lot has happened. Remember, he did make very many promises and, of course, things that he did make during the campaigns, saying that he was going to follow through. And first, of course, on the agenda was the appointment of those 6 judges that had been appointed months earlier by the Judicial Service Commission, nominated but were rejected by the immediate former President, Uhuru Kenyatta. The following day, he did swear them in. And of course, there was that tweet yesterday where Kenya seemed, or the President seemed to revoke Kenya's recognition of the Sahrawi Democratic Republic as an independent state. Minutes later, that tweet was deleted, and pundits are calling that a diplomatic gaffe. Is it? Shall be getting into that. And of course, his first big crisis, the fuel crisis. Of course, the prices of fuel going up last night, and the President, in his inauguration speech, did say that he was going to do away with, among others, the fuel subsidy, saying that it was unsustainable. I am joined in studio tonight to just take a look at what are some of those things that will be top on the agenda for the President as he tries to deal with his entry. I have with me in studio Areba Omoyo Samba, lawyer and political analyst. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the show.
Asante sana.
I have with me, not new on the show, lawyer and political analyst Ishmael Nyaribo. Thank you, Ishmael, for joining us.
Thank you.
And joining us all the way from the coastal city of Mombasa is political analysts and communication experts, Mark Bichachi. Mark, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
We'll also have lawyer and political strategist Kipchumba Karori join us in a few minutes. To start us off, let me begin with you, Areba. What did you make of the President's inauguration speech in as far as the things he said he was going to deal with in the coming days? And we are keeping eye on his first 100 days in office. What stood out for you?
What stood out for me in the inauguration speech was the straight shooting in terms of trying to work out on what he had already promised during the campaign trail. I could see a president who was already setting the agenda on inauguration day and already showing that indeed I now have the instruments of power. I have been saying of what I can be able, of what I will do from day one, but today is from one day, but now today is day one, so I have to straight get into work. And from the entire speech, of course, he spoke on a wide array of issues, from issues of education to issues of the cost of living. I mean, what he just wanted in the whole speech is to say, now I have the instruments of power, sit back, relax, I'm on the driver's seat, now let me drive the agenda. Remember that during the campaign trail, all that he could do was a promissory. And he could just promise and say, this is what we will do. This is what we, if given that mandate by the people of the Republic of Kenya, then I'll be able to do ABCD in what was concocted into what it's called the plan.
Right.
But now from the inauguration speech, it was like, yes, now I have the mandate. Now from the word go, I have to show commitment that I am going to do what I promised. And that is why immediately you saw the Gazette notice coming out for the appointment of the judges. And immediately the next day you could see the swearing in of judges. And on a lighter note, from day one, he already made some appointments. I mean, the jobless former president, or rather retired president, got a job on day one.
All right.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll get into those appointments shortly. Ishmael, what stood out for you from the speech, from the body language, all of it?
On the positive side, we see that the president was quite energetic and decisive in his approach to both his speech and the issues he raised up.
Right.
And he looked like he was a man in control, in full control, I mean, from the way he was conducting the function. Then on the negative side, there was a lot of misses when forgetting the presidents who had visited him. I mean, it's expected that in a proper protocol, the head of state will be informed in advance who has arrived and they get the list correct. So, you know, some of them. And then again, delving into the past, trying to besmirk or talk ill of the outgoing former president, so to say, I think that was unnecessary because, I mean, we were having international guests who have come to see, you know, the inauguration.
All right.
And if you ask me, and again, I cannot critique the communication experts who are, you know, leading the president to say what he has to say, it is an inauguration day. In my view, the speech can be shorter and let the guests go, and then we deal with our internal issues. Like if you look at the deputy president, the way he went overboard in terms of, you know, hitting the former president. It was okay if that was a domestic issue amongst us. Right. But we had international guests, and they did not need to know how the DCI used to mistreat the civil servants and all that. So, but again, you know, we are all human beings. Day one, mistakes can happen. But those are the issues I observed, particularly on that day.
We'll get into more of those later on. Mark Bichachi, what did you make of that inauguration day speech from a messaging point of view?
I think thanks, Ben. But I think that President Dr. William Ruto is quite keen to portray himself as a man of action. He is a man on a mission. He's hit the ground running, and I think that is the predominant message that he wanted to come across. I think he set a target for himself for 100 days. He's trying to make sure that every second and every hour and minute of those 100 days actually come to bear for what he is supposed to deliver. In his message, he was quite reconciliatory. He also focused on the economy, and those are the two main issues that Kenyans are concerned about. That one, will he be able to integrate the whole country together as president? And then secondly, will he be able to address the pressing issues affecting Kenyans of all walks of life? The issues around fuel, the issues around unga, the issues around fertilizer and how farmers are able to access cheaper fertilizers. These are the key issues. But he also has to walk quite a tightrope. For example, in the issue of the port between Mombasa and Naivasha, what is going to happen? Because people in Mombasa are Kenyans. They deserve those services to be there. But at the same time, the people in Naivasha are Kenyans, and there has been an investment on that side as well. So when you look at the balance of things, there are things that he has to walk a tightrope on. The same tightrope is also in the Sahrawi Republic, simply because though Kenya may choose to not recognize the republic, we must remember that there are 40 other states that have, and they are full members of the African Union. So that's where the president has to walk the middle line, and he has to find balance. The other issues, of course, are about have we moved from campaign mode and now looking towards governance questions. That is the key issue again, and I think there is a lot of hangover in the public and in our politics, a hangover around, are we still in the campaign season, or have we moved on in earnest towards now building this country, a task which William Ruto, as I've said before, has set himself up as a man who is on a mission, a doctor who's on a mission to deliver the dosage that he promised the country. And I think that's the key message that he's sending to Kenyans.
And I want us to delve into one of those first points on the agenda of the President William Ruto, and that is, of course, the issue of the 6 judges that we have debated on this show, on many other shows over the last couple of years. The 6 judges that were nominated or appointed by the Judicial Service Commission were rejected by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. They were part of the 41 judges. Let me begin with you, Ishmael. It was something that he promised to do in an interview conducted by my colleague and boss, Joe Ageo. He told Joe that on day one, he will appoint those judges. As a legal practitioner, what was your view on that?
No, I mean, both the intention and the action are actually great, because it is a step towards, obeying the law. And everybody was saying, I mean, whether you are head of state, whether you are a wheelbarrow, handcart pusher, you should obey the law. And there was no reason why the former head of state refused to actually swear in the 6 judges. And there are options. You appoint them as required by the law and share your intelligence, and then again there's a tribunal to remove these people in case there are justifiable reasons why they should be removed. So we were never given any reason, Ben, why did Uhuru Kenyatta refuse to appoint the 6 judges as had been cleared by the JSC. But it's also perturbing and quite surprising, because you see, when you go to State House, you go to become a president of the people, and you can never delete what has been done by the past regime. Delete, it's not possible. You can try to correct this and that. So my humble expectation was that the head of state would come up and say, okay, the intelligence we had from the former president, because the president as it is, President William Ruto now has that intelligence. I mean, he should share and rubbish it and say, look, this is why the former president was not doing. We are entitled to know as citizens, why did Uhuru Kenyatta delay? He did not reveal. So William Ruto has come in as the president of this republic. He ought to have come up and say, now, the reasons were actually flimsy. I can tell you that there was nothing. It was A, B, C, D, E. So we've never been told that. No matter, however, now they have been sworn in, and I think it is it's a good gesture. It's a good thing, and it's a right direction towards the rule of law.
Ariba, what's your take on that? And also the fact that the president was very generous on the judiciary, heaping lots of praise on them, of course, for the Supreme Court petition declaration, and even saying adding more money to the judiciary, 3.2 billion more money to the judiciary.
Just to start from where you have left in terms of heaping praise to the judiciary courtesy of the decision that was made by the presidential petition, I think as a legal practitioner, what I usually say when I go to court, there is no winner or there's no loser. Everybody goes and presents their case. At the end of the day, it is the judges who will apply the facts and the law to be able to make a decision. Right. So for me, what I make is that at the end of the day, a decision had to be made. And remember that both parties had already committed to obey the decision of the Supreme Court. Not like they had another option. They had, of course, they had to obey it. But then what I think at the hindsight of the president's mind, although I'm not in that mind, is to try and empower the judiciary so that at the end of the day, it can stand bold as it's meant to be. Remember, severally, we have had issues during the Maraga time, several run-ins, which at times some people came out and said, look at Maraga, CJ Emeritus now. He's crying over, I'm a citizen, and all those issues. So there have been a not so healthy relationship between the judiciary and the executive. And also that explains why the conversation around the judiciary fund, it was one of the best, it was one of the big topics during the campaign trail. And remember that the judiciary fund just got operationalized, I think, in June, just a few months before the election. And what the president now was trying to say is that we are going to fully operationalize the judiciary fund, which is a provision in the law. And then at the end of the day, let's continue bolstering the fund so that the judiciary can stand tall and make decisions as it's supposed to be. Let me tell you, as practitioners, and my senior will tell you here, that sometimes we feel sorry for, when you go into some courts, we feel sorry in terms of the sorry state of even the infrastructure in some of these courts. So if we are to have a robust economy, if we are to have investor confidence in any country, then you have to have a judiciary that not only resolves disputes in a just manner, but also in a timely manner. Coming now to the issue of the swearing in of the judges.
Yes.
I mean, the law is clear that the president ought to swear in, appoint and swear in judges as recommended by the Judicial Service Commission. Remember that the president has a considerable amount of representation at the Judicial Service Commission. In an event where, as a president, I feel that, of course, my representatives at the Judicial Service Commission, led by the Attorney General, have a responsibility to come back and tell me, Your Excellency, we are conducting this for these judges, and I think we have adverse information about the Judge ABCD. I feel that there was a failure in terms of transmission of information and goodwill, having the Judicial Service Commission, where the President has representatives, I believe 4, and then the names are forwarded, and the President comes back and says, you know what, I cannot appoint this one and this one and this one because I have information ABCD. Why didn't his representatives at the commission give that information to other commissioners to help them make an otherwise decision instead of forwarding those names for appointment and swearing in, and then the President backtracks? Remember that the hands of the President are tied when it comes to making such an appointment. Right. Once the Judicial Service Commission present the names of who they have deemed fit to be able to be appointed, then it's incumbent upon the President to do the honors of gazetting and appointment and swearing in. So it was a slap on the face seeing the President not coming out and saying why exactly the judges had not been appointed, right, and also his representatives at the Judicial Service Commission, so this keeping mum.
Was long overdue.
I mean, for me it was long overdue, and I am glad that the President did commit on several occasions that, hey, on day 1, after putting the Bible down, I am going to gazette and appoint these judges.
Right.
And it happened as he had promised.
Mark Bichachi, you and I have had many discussions on this. What's your take on this? And also, what do you think of the fact that the President, William Ruto, undid so many things that his predecessor, had done, even during the inauguration speech at Kasarani? What does that say to you?
Well, the first rule of politics, borrowing from the Roman Republic, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, meaning the voice of the people is the voice of God. So we must commend President William Ruto for making good on his promise to the Kenyan people, because in voting for him, the Kenyan people expressed their opinion on this particular matter. They emphatically said by over 50% and 70,000 votes that it is important and it is dependent upon the President now to ensure that the judges are appointed, and therefore that is the will of the people. Now, there is still a case in petition at the... Sorry, I can hear feedback, so I'm having problems speaking.
Sorry, Mark, just continue. We'll sort that out. Just continue.
Okay, thank you. So the issue here is this. There is a case at appeal that is trying to determine the very question that former President Uhuru Kenyatta was pushing and saying that the President does have a say in whether judges get appointed or not. Now, what will happen to that case is going to be the second issue, because it is clear that the current head of state, who is Dr. William Ruto, has made a decision that once the Judicial Service Commission passes a certain judge to be put in a certain position, then the person will be put in that position. So the question really is, will the judges uphold what was Uhuru Kenyatta's position? I wager not, because then they will be ruling something that is detrimental to them. But also, there is no need to do so, because the people of the Republic of Kenya have spoken. I'm also a big supporter of judicial funding. I think that the addition of 3 billion shillings to the judiciary is still a drop in the ocean. We need to give them full independence, go towards a percentage of the budget that is dedicated wholly to the judiciary, so that this independence is not based on what the executive desires. So once again, we must commend the Deputy President for
the President.
Oh, yes. The President for making good on his promise.
Now, Ben,
it's a very common mistake.
Number two,
yeah, Ben,
Mark, before I let you go, in just 1 minute only, where you are in Mombasa today, the Azimio La Umoja One Kenya leader Raila Odinga and then the other leaders in Azimio have launched an assault on the Supreme Court judges, basically saying, Raila Odinga saying shame on the judiciary, saying they will mobilize 1 million people to march to eject them. What's your take on that? Very quickly.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. Number one, the Azimio leaders do need to keep the interest of their public, their supporters, going as they move into this phase of practicing opposition politics. But at the same time, there is true exhaustion in the public over this election period, the court case. So trying to hang on to the coattails of the court case might not bear the fruit that they desire, because the question that Kenyans are asking them is, what alternative are you going to offer? How are you going to make sure that the government of William Ruto is kept in check? I do not think they are well advised to hang on to the issues of the case, in as much as, yes, I agree, the ruling to them was almost quite atrocious. But the truth is that there comes a time where they must consider what is the role they're going to play. You either drive looking forward, or you look at the rear view mirror and you go nowhere.
All right. Ariba, what's your take on this new assault on the judiciary?
I mean, first of all, my brother here did say that sometimes you can't outdo what the past regime has done. And being my senior, I want to remind him that probably what the President William Ruto inherited from Uhuru was the sword, the instruments of power, not his mind. So he has the right of exercising his mind in the best way he deems fit. Then on the issue of assault on the judiciary, I think that was a very sad statement for somebody who describes himself as a champion of the post-independence democracy and the rule of law. We were in court with representatives of Azimio, One Kenya Alliance, and of course they did make their reservations in terms of the ruling. As a legal practitioner, I don't have at times to agree with a ruling, more so when it goes against the wishes of my clients.
Right.
But remember, at the end of the day, I have the responsibility to, or rather I have the responsibility to obey it and also preserve the sanctity of the court. I wonder what kind of picture that the opposition leader right now, Raila Amolo Odinga, is sending to his supporters and to Kenyans, when he clearly states that we can have 1 million people march to go and eject the Supreme Court judges from office. I can promise you that I think, as Mark has said, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance leader has to decide whether he's doing politics or really playing his role of opposition in the best way he can. I think where we are past politics. And I can promise you, not 1 million people will picket or will andamana, not 1,000, not even 10. Because as Mark has clearly alluded, is that the fatigue of elections is past us now. And it seems like most people want to engage on a drive gear and be able to move forward. Because, again, removing of Supreme Court judges is not done on the streets of Nairobi.
Right.
There's a clear procedure in terms of law, how to remove a Supreme Court judge.
In 1 minute only, your thoughts on Azimio's pronouncements.
No, you know, you must understand where Raila Odinga is coming from. And you must appreciate that once a judge has delivered a judgment, he becomes completely unrelated to it, and people can make the comments they want to make about it. If you use an adjective in your judgment as a judge, and you probably say this is like a person is stupid, the person you have addressed can elect to discuss that element the way he so wishes. So I agree entirely that we are now already past the campaign mode and we must move forward. We have 5 years to build the economy. We have 5 years to support our government and make sure we move forward. But Ben, I wanted to come back to the element of how soon and how fast should these promises be implemented. Just in 1 second. We have 5 years to handle all these things. The people around the president, and Ben, you remember we've handled these shows with you elsewhere and here, we've always blamed the people around the president. If the people around William Ruto are going to tell him that, our supporters want to see that you have done what you promised this week, they are going to fail him. William Ruto has 5 years to run this country. He can swear in judges today, and he can also swear them in next week. It's not a big deal. But I think William Ruto as a person is very strategic and he has a plan. That I agree.
Right.
But if you compare and contrast, Ben, with what we have seen going on, let's say in Kisii County, for example, where you will bring people out, put them in the stadium, look at the certificates, tell them to drive the car if they can drive or they cannot. I mean, you must proceed with a plan. If you just want to do something to shake people's emotions, you will fail soon, sooner than later.
Let's take a quick commercial break here on Front and Center. Don't go anywhere. When we return, we shall be delving into more of the President, William Ruto's in-tray, and of course what has happened in the last couple of days. We shall be specifically talking about a tweet that was sent out by the President yesterday, which seemed to revoke Kenya's recognition of Sahrawi Democratic Republic as an independent state, getting into what some pundits are calling a diplomatic gaffe by the President. That tweet was later on, deleted, and that is part of what some people are calling teething problems by the new administration. We shall get into that when we come back. Don't go too far. Welcome back to the broadcast. This is Front and Center here on NTV. President William Ruto may have been caught up in a diplomatic standoff with the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. That is in a tweet that was sent out yesterday by the president's Twitter account, seemingly severing ties with that country, seemingly revoking Kenya's recognition of it as an independent state. That tweet was later deleted, and of course, Kenya stated later that it supports the United Nations framework as a sole mechanism to find a lasting solution to the Western Sahara dispute. We have been speaking to experts on this, and maybe I can come to you, Mark Bichachi. You start us off. One of experts who spoke to Professor Israel Kodiaga said that the president should avoid tweeting at all, especially when it comes to such heavy matters. What is your take on this issue?
First and foremost, I agree with the professor that tweeting is not exactly the best platform upon which to change our diplomatic stance to another country. We must recognize that his second tweet was actually the correct position of the country because as members of the African Union and indeed members of the Security Council at the UN, which has taken upon itself to actually recognize the Sahrawi Republic, puts us in a position where we are dedicating ourselves to the community of nations and how they are moving forward towards how they're handling these issues. But also we must understand that the president was also looking at the diplomatic ties between Kenya and Morocco, which also claims certain sections of where the Sahrawi Republic is. And this particular kinds of rules requires that people walk gingerly and walk the middle ground. And that's what I was talking about, that there are lots of situations upon which our President William Ruto has to really walk the tightrope between what is supposed to happen and is good for the country, and also making sure that we do not upset our supporters and our allies across the world. And that same balance is the tightrope he has to walk also when it comes to the fuel crisis, and the same tightrope balance he has to walk when it comes to the port operations moving back to Mombasa vis-a-vis the needs and the desires of people in Naivasha and the billions of shillings that were willing to be invested in Naivasha. So there are quite a number of issues that are going to kind of straitjacket the president, and one of those is definitely this issue with the Sahrawi Republic, and I must commend him for actually taking the time and making sure that he corrected that tweet and made the right position clear to all and sundry.
Ishmael,
Yeah.
that tweet has been criticized, people saying the president does not even have a cabinet yet. Why make such a bold move and announce it on Twitter? What do you think?
And how was it actually arrived at? I mean, how did the head of state decide that I will disentangle the country from Sahrawi? Even if it has its own issues with Morocco, there are many countries like that. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine, Crimea, you know, that European area where, you know, several countries disintegrated and finally were recognized. It takes a long time for a country to be recognized under the UN rules. But how the head of state of that country was at Kasarani. He was participating as a friend of the country, and
President William Ruto even recognized him.
He recognized him. So at what point did they do that, quote unquote, public participation within the State House, so to say, so that they decided, the head of state decided that then we have to disentangle. So this is what I was saying, Ben, that the campaign mood is over. And I think the people around our president should appreciate this fact. We are not trying to please anybody at this time. The country must be governed according to the constitution and according to the rules. So just waking up immediately and saying this, probably after meeting the Moroccan leader, and then, you know, he says now we will disentangle with the Sahrawi country, which is being recognized now. It's not fair. The fair thing to do, even that tweet can come after a week. What's the big deal? It doesn't have to come emotively, immediately at that very moment. So my point is, we are beyond campaign mode, Ben. We are now into decision making, and there is a plan and a strategy. So the people around the president should realize this. And actually, you say he keeps tweeting. I'm not sure it is the president himself who goes to the phone and tweets. I'm sure he has his communication expert. He is the person who the communication expert is the person who should tell him that, no, okay, Your Excellency, we will do this, but probably we can do it at another time. So I still agitate for the fact that we are beyond campaigns. Everything should be done in accordance to plan.
Is there any diplomatic strategy that would, you know, inform such an action, whether it's for Kenya-Moroccan ties, trade, or whatever, for that to be done in the manner in which it was done yesterday?
I think, first of all, let me blame Kenyans on this. We are too quick to screenshot things. That's on a light note. I mean, it was there. We screenshotted. I mean, even you know, Kenyans, we are just a screenshot gang. Anything, we just screenshot. Anyway, but back to the issue, I fully agree with my brothers here that it was one of a bit unfortunate start-offs in terms of the presidency of Dr. William Ruto. In terms of that tweet, in the manner and the way it came out, it did not come out as a tweet that had been well thought through. But again, I'm glad that after a couple of minutes, after most people had taken screenshots, the correct position, which is informed by the position of our country in terms of its position in the African Union and the United Nations, as also having a seat as an unpermanent member of the Security Council, was later reiterated. But going back to Twitter and diplomacy, you realize that in this time and era, we are having quite a number of decisions being communicated via social media. And this is, I mean, if you look at the times of President Trump, and this is the time when the issues of Twitter diplomacy gained a lot of momentum. And I know that going down, a number of countries have also gone down that trajectory, that sometimes decisions and quite serious issues are communicated not only through verbs, as they call them in foreign affairs, but also through social media. So I don't think that restricting the president from tweeting and from Facebooking is really a big issue. The issue is to get the right information, well thought out information, to go out to the social media handles. Remember, Ben, we are living in a time when you hear breaking news, I know even some of you in the media houses, you know the first place you get to scroll and see whether it's breaking news before even some people break it. So Twitter and social media will still maintain their place in terms of modern day communication. But when it comes from a page which is controlled probably by a head of state or a head of government, then there needs to be a clearer and a well thought and coordinated approach before something comes out of that page. Remember, when I tweet and when you tweet, it's not the same. When you tweet and when the president tweets, there is quite a difference when it comes from the president. I mean, if the president today tweets that let all bars close by 7 p.m., I don't think the bar owners will be waiting to hear from the Ministry of Interior. I know they will close immediately. So going forward, I know it was just quite a jumpy start in terms of that issue, but going forward, there needs to be a well-thought way of implementing our policies and communicating them. Remember that also, my brother here has raised the issue of how was that decision reached. Remember that the president of Sahrawi was at Kasarani and he was recognized. Then a day later, a delegation from Morocco visited the head of state. So you get to wonder really what informed such a decision being made before it was retracted. Right. I know to some extent that the president did not have such authority to make such a decision by himself. There needed to be such communication coming from the cabinet level before he could communicate it. And that is why I believe that it was retracted. But going forward, we need to be clear and we need to be careful when we do any communication from the head of state perspective.
Mark Bichachi, I know it's only day 3 out of almost 2,000 days to go in the next 5 years. Does this give a pointer to President William Ruto's foreign policy going forward?
You know, it's a good question you ask, because President William Ruto is a very interesting international diplomat. We have seen the kind of trips that he's made in the past. We've seen the kind of friends and allies that he has made. So is this a sign of things to come? I would wager not so, and I'll tell you why. Remember, this is a decision that he made at a time where his cabinet is not in place, his foreign affairs advisors are not in place. Once they're in place, then it is expected that, number one, there'll be those traditional positions that are of strategic importance to the country that will continue. For example, our relationships with the UK, the United States, other allies in Tanzania and Uganda, in the East African community. And of course, he has already committed himself to ensure that the East African dream continues to be perpetuated. So there is certain things that we know will continue because that is the tradition and the strategic importance that Kenya holds. At the same time, he is quite the different leader from Uhuru Kenyatta. I saw an article the other day talking about Uhuru Kenyatta, the big hugger, where he used to hug everyone, and he had this warm way of receiving people with his diplomacy. William Ruto is, as I said, is a man of action. I expect that he would engage more on a platform of what can be done, how can we move things forward, how can we do trade, how can we make resources available for the people of Kenya. Now, this difference, will it be significant? I do not think so.
I mean, just a small support in terms of what you said. Remember that the president is the #1 diplomat of the country. And I don't think we'll be in a position to judge him from what happened yesterday. I know going forward, and as I am optimistic that going forward in terms of our foreign policy and in terms of our communication, things are going to be better and improve. He has already shown where and what he needs from the international partnerships. He has made himself clear that probably going forward, he is looking at positioning Kenya not as lower than other countries, but as an equal partner in terms of the foreign arena. So we can't judge him from the tweet and from what happened a few days ago. We still have 1,000 and something days to be able to see how our foreign policy envelops out.
All right. I want us to talk very quickly about one more thing that will point out to the kind of challenges that the president is facing as he starts his tenure. That is, he has spoken about the country's public debt and the high cost of living, talked about lowering the cost of fertilizer to try and curb the skyrocketing cost of living. And that something that is right in the middle of that, Ishmael, is the high cost of fuel. And yesterday, being the 14th day of the month, we did see a 20 shilling rise in the cost of 1 litre of super petrol. And the president did say that he will do away with the fuel subsidies because they are not sustainable, and he seems to have a plan. But this is just a crisis that has just hit him on day 2 of his presidency. What is your take on how he's dealing with it?
Well, the crisis is temporary, Ben, and I will not change my mind from what we said before during campaigns that it's not so easy when you talk about a nation's economics and the prices and the cost of living. It is not a Nairobi, it's not a Kenyan problem, it is a global problem. Everybody from the first world countries in the West, in the Europe, in the Eastern Asias, they are all saying that living standards have so much increased, and yet the family income and the nation's per capita income is still, a big challenge. There is no money. You want to live a certain lifestyle, but you cannot afford it. So what Kenyans need to understand is when the government gave the subsidy, it means that the treasury was actually coughing money and giving to multinationals who are bringing oil in Kenya, the fuel. So Kenyans ordinarily would think that now again the price has gone up. So, and he promised that the price will be going down. This is a temporary teething problem, because what the president is saying is he will go around it and look for a way to ensure that at least there is production, in the country. There is better, agricultural output, so that fuel is not the only issue. Because once you touch fuel, it is true that every other sector is touched. But you cannot resolve it by taking money from the exchequer, from the treasury, and pumping it to foreign multinationals. That is not a solution to him. Right. So I think the State House must now unleash and send the way they did during the campaign. They are very good at messaging. They must take now people, they must send correct people and strategists and inform the country that this is a temporary issue. We will overcome it. People should not judge the president, oh, he said they won. If they do that, actually, then they will not be supporting the country. They will not be supporting the president to, implement his plans. Right. This is just a temporary issue, and it must be understood as a global problem, not a Kenyan problem.
To start
with,
with,
there's a plan.
Of course, William Samoei Ruto has told us that there is a plan. But going back to the issue of fuel, when I was looking at the numbers, I realized that it's more of an immoral kind of trade. Because you realize that the amount of money that is spent in terms of paying in terms of the subsidy, if you calculate in a whole year, it will come to close to 200 and something billion. Because in 4 months alone, I think we have incurred around 60 billion in terms of subsidies. And unfortunately, this money goes to very specific multinationals. It doesn't go to everybody, which means that only these multinationals can flourish at the expense of those small petrol stations which exist in our villages where our grandmothers go to get kerosene from. As my brother has alluded, is that we are already in a very bad hole as a country in terms of the issue of the fuel price. So hard decisions have to be made. The first question is, should we continue getting involved in these unsustainable subsidies, or should we just stop and endure a painful time which is short-lived? And I believe that William Samoei Ruto, the president, did make a decision that let us endure this problem for some time as we craft solutions which then can be able to apply to our case. Right. Because if you look at the way the fuel subsidy program works, is that we get money from the exchequer, we pay the multinationals to be able to dictate the market forces, to be able to dictate the cost of fuel. What then that happens is that at the end of the day, we do not allow the market forces to dictate the price. And then at the end of the day, we also get to push out those who do not get the subsidies. They're not able to continue being in market. And one thing you have to notice is the way when the fuel prices have changed to a higher, they change immediately. But then when they have changed to the lower, they'll tell you that the stock we are having is still an old stock. Right. And I was having that conversation with somebody last night, like, of course it has changed. It's just an hour past midnight. So how long did it take you guys to get the new stock? So there are those teething challenges. And at the end of the day, right, hard decisions have to be made. Right. And then the good thing is that once we endure this for a month or two, I know that the economic advisors of His Excellency, the President, are right, going to craft a solution which will apply to our local problem.
Okay. Yeah. Mark Michachi, as we wind up, is the President dealing with this fuel issue in the best way possible?
I think it is very important to tell all Kenyans that the president is not the president of Ukraine, neither is he the president of Russia, and he cannot control the international dynamics as a singular president. When that reality is forecast, then we cannot talk about 2-3 months and then we will have solved the fuel crisis. No, 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 no. We are in a worldwide economic crunch. What we need to pray and hope and believe that the current government will do is create innovative ways to do the following. Number one, to increase our economy and to increase the opportunities for our people so that they can afford the increased price of these commodities. It is very unlikely that the prices of fuel will go back to the 100 shillings we were used to. What Kenya needs to figure out is how can she make more money, how can she grow her economy, how can she export more in a world where the inflation is running rampant. And I think one of the things that the president should do through his team is also communicate to Kenyans that we need to tighten our belts. The whole world is tightening its belts. Our coffers cannot afford the kind of subsidies that Germany gives. So the truth is that, yes, we all hope and we had wished that the price of unga, the price of fertilizer, the price of everything would have dropped on day one. But unfortunately, the war in Ukraine is still going on. It is not ending. The issues that were brought around the supply chain disruption, around COVID, still continue. So the truth is that Kenyans must understand Kenya is not an island in the community of nations. We are affected by international issues. And whether we had voted Azimio or whether we would have voted any other way, I think we would still be in this situation we are in concerning the fuel. So tightening our belts is what is needed.
All right, we have to wind up. Let me begin with you with your final thoughts, Mark Bichachi, as we look forward to, as we review the first 100 days of the Ruto administration and, of course, going forward. What are your final thoughts? What's your prediction?
Well, this is my final thought, that number one, I think William Ruto as president will continue to be a man of action. I think he's going to be hands-on. I think he's going to push his agenda as hard as he can. My prayer that equally he chooses a cabinet that is hands-on, that continues to choose to deliver to the people of Kenya. What is also going to be critical as he's hands-on, he must also remember to include the public, to include other people, and to move ahead with them so that it is not just delivery, it is delivery with people in mind.
Thanks, Mark. Ishmael, your final thoughts.
Yes, I think it's too early, Ben, for me to really make any reasonable comments in terms of the 100 days to come. I mean, the president, the judiciary, they have all said it was an act of God. It was because of God. I think the earlier they realized that it was their effort, it was the effort of the UDA strategic team that put William Ruto in State House. The earlier they realized that the campaign promises really do not matter. Politics is all about leaving behind what you said and moving forward according to a strategic plan again. So I think that's what I can say for now. We still have a lot of time. The head of state has a lot of time. It's 5 years. So let's give them let's give him time. Let him organize himself, get the ministries, get the ministers, the PSS, and then we start to judge. And in my view, there should be no hurry to anything, whether it is appointing the ministers, permanent secretary, principal secretaries. There is no hurry. There is nobody who needs to justify the action of the president. He is in control, that I know, and I think we should just give him time to do his thing.
Ariba, your final thoughts?
I think we all agree on this panel today that the president is a person who seems to be in charge of and who walks his talk. I think we are all having this conversation. It's as if it's 100 days later, but it's only 3 days into once he was sworn into office. So for me, I've seated back, I've relaxed, I have my seatbelt on because I'm ready for this journey with His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, so that then at the end of the day, he can unravel what was presented to us as the plan. We want to see how the plan works in terms of the fuel prices, how the plan works in terms of the cost of living, how the plan works in terms of education, health, and all this. Again, I also can't judge within the 3 days he's been in office. But if you see the trajectory he has taken in terms of being hands-on and in terms of doing what he has said he will do, then I think we are in for quite a transformation as a country. Only time will tell. Let's begin and see how the plan unfolds.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on the show tonight to help us make sense to Kenyans as the William Ruto era begins. Ariba Omoyo Samba, lawyer and political analyst. Ishmael Nyaribo, and of course joining us all the way from Mombasa, communication strategist and political analyst Mark Bichach. Many thanks for your time tonight, gentlemen. So we leave it on front and center tonight, this 15th day of September 2022. Of course, here on NTV, we shall continue to unpack, the promises and the workings of the Ruto administration. We shall be keeping an eye on the first 100 days as promised. Of course, helping Kenyans unpack what the administration will be up to. So be sure to keep NTV for a most qualified coverage of this. Be sure to join us every Thursday night from around 9:30 p.m. as we try to dissect the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic here on Front and Center. On behalf of the rest of the team, I'm Ben Kitili. Thank you for watching. Good night from Nairobi.
This is NTV.
Jik cleans and kills 99.9% of illness-causing germs and COVID-19 in your home. Jik, your family's guardian against germs and COVID-19.
We're back at it again on Teen Republic, and this weekend we're keeping it all Kenyan, so make sure you request your favorite Kenyan track.